Hey, everybody. We want to welcome you to the Counterpoise podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts. My name is Samantha Adams. We do have another co-host who's not here today. He is out on vacation. His name is Malik Foster. And we also join right here with our third co-host. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Everett Sears, one of the third co-hosts of the Counterpoise podcast. So today, we have a pretty interesting show today. We want to talk about the race against time, right? That race for men, what it looks like, and the race for women, what that looks like, and how that plays a role in, some of our relationships. So we're going to go off. We got this topic from a clip off Instagram. We'll play that clip for you guys, and then go into discussion with it. This clip was brought to us by On to Talk, the podcast. Here we go.
Against a financial clock, you're racing against a biological clock. Mm-hmm. So you ready to be settled down by 25, 24 even. But for most men, our clock is based on, can I pay a mortgage? Mm-hmm. Can I support a wife and 2 children? Yeah. Can I support 2 car payments? Mm-hmm. Can I support insurance and things like that? Mm-hmm. And for most of us, we're not going to get there till 35. Yeah. Right. 30 early, and this is if he's a tech bro and things like that. Right. So yeah, we're not as enthusiastic about y'all like jumping into that with y'all. But the unfortunate thing about it is when he's ready, you might not be able to pop kids out.
So would you say that's why men run from that?
Absolutely.
Or run from commitment of that because of that responsibility that comes with
that's what I think.
Loving a woman and commitment.
So I'm racing against.
So I guess one of the first things we want to do is just talk about what they meant by the biological clock as well as the financial clock. For starters, I'll start with the men's and the financial clock. As we kind of heard them go into depth and explaining, some of the responsibilities that you think that you have, that we know that you'll have to take on as being head of a household, are things that in today's society may not necessarily come with your first job fresh out of school or with, your first opportunity to get a job here. So that requires you to necessarily develop more into your career set, get more understanding onto how to build financial wealth, and so that you can, support a family on a certain level. So you want to go into the biological clock?
Yeah, sure. So the biological clock, most people know what that is. And for those that don't, just understand that women have a time frame to produce, right? Produce children. And so because your body, eggs don't, even though women are born with their eggs, they're not always able to produce children. And so at a certain age, women go through the change of life. And then after that change of life occurs, they're no longer able to have children. And so when you're talking about building families and relationship and things like that, you got to talk about that clock, right? Because, when if the purpose is to procreate and grow your family and all that, especially when you're talking about Black families, you want to make sure you do it when you can, right? But at the same time, you have to balance out when you're physically able to. And that time frame can range for women. It can be anywhere, depending on if you have a medical condition or not. If you don't, for a healthy woman, it's sometime in the mid 40s to like 50s is when women typically go through that change. Some women go through it earlier than that. But once you hit 30, it does start. That's when your egg production starts to decline. So it does become harder the older you get to have children. And the reason why this clock conversation is important, right, is because in society today, women don't just sit around and have babies, right? Women do other things, right, like work and provide for their other family, try to get their life together, get their mind right, get into a good, healthy relationship before they have children. And sometimes that takes time, right? And so there you have it. You have this race where you're trying to, build your own, I guess, quote unquote, empire or grow your family. But you're trying to do it with the right person. And that takes time too. And you want to do it at the right time. And that takes time. And so there's this race against the clock. And for women, what that looks like is sometimes women have children with people they should not be having children with for the sake of just having the child. You also see, we've done a podcast on this before. I think it was, what's her name? Michelle K. Williams, or whatever her name is. She was talking about going to sperm banks and just getting, sperm and going through IVF treatments so that you can have children without a mate, so that you're not, quote unquote, wasting time, right? And so when you're talking about that clock, it definitely has effects on relationships, and it has effects on society as a whole, like the outlook, right? Because if the goal is to have children, do you want to do that in a traditional sense or a non-traditional sense? The choice is always yours. But pardon me, if you choose to do it in a traditional sense, that means you're supposed to find a mate. And that right there, or mate is supposed to find you, however you want to look at that, right? And that takes time. And so we run into this issue where, we're supposed to properly and appropriately vet men, but we spend our younger years, having a good time. You know what I'm saying? Living life and doing things like that. So the question becomes, how do you approach that? Because we can sit here older, looking back at life and telling younger ladies, hey, look, you should do it this way. But that's not always going to work, right? People ain't always going to do it the way that you say that you think that they should do it, because you've lived, they haven't. And so I think that sometimes we have to remember that and keep that in the forefront of our minds.
Yeah, absolutely. And so within that topic as well, I think, he talked about the effects of that in the relationship. One of the things he talked about was just like in the timing that it takes sometimes for men to kind of figure out how to get that wave, how to get that, if you will, groove, and being able to have the ability to feel like they're willing to take on the responsibilities and have enough income to do such a thing. A lot of times we see that, unfortunately, what happens in the relationships is, like you mentioned earlier, Sam, is that people kind of rush those situations with people that they maybe felt like they should not necessarily. And I don't think they maybe felt that way because they maybe wouldn't have did it if they felt that way. But in hindsight, maybe realize that might not have been the best idea. And I think that you see that a lot of times when you see early pregnancies, things of that nature. When looking at that from a male standpoint, that's very tough to be a young man, especially trying to figure out yourself in life and just figure out how to make it out here. That can be a lot challenging. That can be a lot more challenging, for an individual to take on that pressure, because it's already the pressure that you have of being a young man to figure out how to just make life good for you as an individual. Make sure that you have the things that you need to make sure that you're able to kind of move around in the world the way that you would like to. And then adding on the idea of not only doing it for yourself, but then doing it for 2 or 3 other people could be challenging at times because of how long it may take for, you to feel like you really got yourself in that space. So I think that's why, we see that it happens a little bit later in life for guys, if at all. For some people, they just always may be in that place where, unfortunately, they need. And we kind of talked about this last week on how people might structure their households. You mentioned it too, Sam, when talking about, with the biological clock, how some people might not only just defer relationships, but can defer having a child for relationship purposes, but also for career purposes. They may feel like that may hinder them in trying to move forward in some of the decisions that they're making. And so they want to get themselves in a certain position before they allow themselves to be able to care for that child in a certain way. So these factors kind of weigh in on both parties equally, and there's no one right answer, I guess, for it. I think it's just kind of, people have to kind of decide what it is that they haven't presented to them, and the options that they're looking to move forward with. Um, I don't know, Sam, if you had anything you wanted to add on to that, but I
Yeah.
also know that we wanted to talk about
Yeah.
this pressure's played into us in America as well.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the financial aspect of it too. So for men, of course, there's that financial clock because, like you said, E, they're trying to look for ways to make sure that they can not only sustain themselves but sustain other people. Because that with the man being the leader of a household in a traditional household, he's responsible for everybody, right? So if the family fails, it's because he failed. And the last thing that he wants is for that to happen. Now, everything isn't always going to be perfect. Things are going to get hard. The last thing a man wants to do is be out there working, trying to get everything together, and he can't afford to live or can't afford to care for his family, right? So, you know, and that takes time. It takes time to build that money, to learn how to manage it appropriately. Um, Also, too, if you go to college, right? If you go to college, if you go to grad school, like all that takes time. And the thing about time that we often, I know I say it a lot, but we don't talk about a lot is the fact that time is the one thing in this world that you can spend and not get back. Like you can't make up for lost time. You can't do anything. Once that thing is gone, it is gone, right? And so that's why it's important to appreciate every moment. And so when it comes to this and building and trying to set your family up for success, some men, like you said, it does come later. And the other part about it is, it's one of the reasons why men are typically attracted, and it's not true for everybody. Well, it's not true for everybody, but it's true for a lot of men, right? Why they're typically attracted to younger women, because younger women have more space in that clock. You see what I'm saying? In their biological clock, when he's in a position to be able to care for him. So, that is one of the reasons why things look that way, and so, but it's hard because let's say you have a woman and you have a man and they're both around the same age. It doesn't mean that they can't be together or whatever. It's just that, you can see how struggle can take place in the beginning of that relationship due to finances. And then if there's issues there with the finances, right, it can put a strain on the relationship itself. Because if you're struggling financially, think about it. When you talk about marriage, 50% of marriages are end in divorce today. 80% are initiated by women. A majority of them are due to finances. Finances and fidelity. Those are the two reasons why people divorce. So if a man is struggling financially in a relationship, it is very possible that a woman may, end that relationship because he's unable to, handle that, which is one of the reasons why that clock is so important for a man. And, a lot of times when we talk about relationships, we always talk about, the biological clock of a woman, but we very rarely ever talk about the financial clock of a man and what that looks like for him, right? We can talk about how women will tear a man down about his finances, but we never talk about what it takes for that man to be built up financially so that he can support a family.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think that, when we look at this, you may mention to it in some senses, like how culturally there's kind of like a disconnect with that, and sometimes, like, in particular, when you look at it from the standpoint of, men and maybe a little bit older having a preference to maybe dating someone a little bit younger due to the fact that, again, once they kind of gotten to a certain place in life, and they were looking to have some of these things. And I think it wasn't necessarily on that clip that we have, but it was on another clip. or a commenter, I think, in that clip made a statement to kind of show how like what some men are ended up finding is that again, some women did not take that time per se to wait to have children. You know what I'm saying? They may have, been in relationship with other people earlier on in life and decided that was a good time for them. So, um, when you do kind of get yourself aligned, it doesn't necessarily always mean that you'll be aligned with people that may be within a certain age group or same age bracket. That's not to say that there aren't, but it does say that that does tend to show that there are some individuals who may choose to date younger, and you may see those 5, 10 year, differences and age brackets for some people in some relationships. And I think that that's something that we see steadily rising as well, due to the fact that again, times aren't the same. Like we talked about back in the day, you may have been able to find someone your age while you were going to school, doing other things, and they were okay with having a family and getting everything going while you worked on what you were doing to kind of support the family. Nowadays, as we stated, especially ways that things are going on in our society, women are willing to say that, hey, you know what, maybe we'll hold off on having families early on and choose to pursue an education or choose to pursue a career. And that what leads it to, again, maybe, a group of women and men who are equally aged that may not have children together and they could link together, but then there becomes that pressure of, okay, well, are you looking to become this provider for me? Are you looking to provide, you know what I'm saying, to offer these type of things because I made these sacrifices to get to this place in life and I want to be with someone who has these things to offer. But now I'm looking to see, like, are you willing to take on that type of requirement? And I think when it comes to that, that's a lot, right? Before, especially for a man who's just now getting in that space. I think, like you said, if you feel like you feel comfortable as a man with who you're dealing with, to say, you know what, hey, I'm willing to make that journey. I'm willing to walk that route with you, and you know what I'm saying. I'm willing to give and commit to that. Then go ahead and do it. But like we all know, things happen in life. There's ups and downs. You know what I'm saying? So if you guys both aren't able to weather those storms, who knows how that may come out. So that's pretty much what I had to say on it as far as like how, we look at these relationships in today's society and what, individuals may be looking for from, both on the male side of the game and, also on the female side, where it's like, okay, I've made all these sacrifices. I've done all these things. I've waited to do this. I have you know what I'm saying, a biological clock that's clocking. So I need to know that, you know what I'm saying, you're willing to, commit completely to me. And I don't think that that's necessarily wrong, but I do think that, you know what I'm saying, some men have to understand that where they are in life, what's coming along the path, and making sure that they don't feel forced into certain situations just because, you know what I'm saying, again, that unfortunately someone their age may have certain requirements, you know what I mean, that they're looking for, that you make sure that you're doing it because that's who you want to do it with and not necessarily because of that purpose, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. And that's the reason why I was saying, like, sometimes when you're looking at like age and stuff in relationship, it's not impossible and it's not even uncommon, right? But at the same time, like, I mean, shoot, you even have plenty of relationships with a woman that's older than the man, right? But at the end of the day, when you often see older men, having relationships with younger women, it's for their purposes, it's about procreation because now they're financially stable enough, right? And for that young lady, it's about security. And that's what you're talking about when you're talking about that clock. But when you look at it culturally speaking, right? Excuse me, here in America, the way that it's done is different than in some countries, some other countries, right? Like in some other countries, aside from even in spaces where it's an arranged marriage, right? Oftentimes the man is much older and it's really about having children, right? The female is much younger. She learns pretty much taught everything by her husband because she, marries at such a young age. Um, and that happens in arranged marriages and non-arranged marriages, right? And it's more common in other countries to see that. Um, the thing that, one thing we didn't mention though, when we're talking about these clocks is the lifespan, the life expectancy. Also, to remember that the life expectancy of a man is shorter than that of a woman. So, with the life expectancy of a man being that shorter, and then he's marrying older, he's at an older age to a young lady, there's a higher likelihood of her being widowed. You see what I'm saying? Becoming a widow and having to make sure she takes care of those children. Now, on one hand, here in America, that does happen. It absolutely happens. But, that's one of the other things that men have to consider when they're thinking about those finances. Like, after I leave this earth, what space, position, or place am I leaving my family in financially? Especially too, if she doesn't work or if she doesn't go get an education and she doesn't have the skills or experience to be able to go out and work. She may be able to gain those things, but she may not be able to necessarily earn anything equal to or close to equal to what he was earning. So that obviously will change the lifestyle of that family. So that's something that he absolutely has to consider, when taking on a family too. It's not just about bills, right? And so culturally speaking, that's why also to notice that in other cultures, family is heavily involved. This is heavily involved here too, because think about it. When two parents can't take care of the babies, they typically go to the grandparents or an auntie or an uncle or something like that. Most often the grandparents though, right? And that's because, it's a village, it takes a village, right? But you see in other cultures, family being even more involved in relationships between people than you do here in America. And so, I think that it's also a consideration when you're talking about this time clock, because who is going to be there? Who's going to be around to help you if something were to happen to your significant other?
No, absolutely. I think family plays a big role in that as well. But another thing that I think that's kind of interesting in this dynamic, it is like we talked about too, is first, like, the way that we see these things in the culture. You know what I'm saying? When you look at it from the standpoint of, again, in some countries, if an individual is financially established and well enough, they can take on more than one, spouse. And that's allowed. And you know what I'm saying? Generally, that's done by people who happen to be older. You know what I'm saying? They're looking to be, as they say, fruitful and multiply. And so those type of situations occur around the country as well. And it's something that I think that also plays into that financial clock, right? Like if a man has worked to get himself established and get himself in that position, then that happens. And then also another place is, like you said, if a woman has worked and gotten herself into a position, then she should be able to have, multiple husbands as well in those nations that allow such, So I definitely think that that's another factor because, that definitely plays a role into deciding, you know what I'm saying, how people are living, especially in today's society, as we see that is getting a little bit tougher and tougher for people to make a living for themselves, especially on a one-on-one tip. So I think that's something that we may see looked into more in the coming days. But
Yeah. And so, yeah, also that you have make a good point about, polygamous families from in other countries. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, there are female cultures. Let me say that differently. There are female dominated cultures where, the woman may have multiple husbands, but it's more common to see men that have multiple wives and they have many, many children. So, they have to be able to provide, right? And, that biological clock thing still is an issue, but it's not as much of an issue when you're talking about procreation and you have multiple spouses. You know what I'm saying? So, at the end of the day, it's always something that should be considered when you're looking at a relationship, whether or not you want to have kids, whether or not, like, what does your financial situation look like? Last week we talked about the traditional man versus the 50-50 man. Right. And so in that traditional relationship, that man is going to be providing everything. But in that 50-50 relationship, both she and him are going to be providing. And in that 50-50 relationship, what does that look like? Both financially and as far as, growing your family. It's going to be to each his own. Right. Nobody's telling you what to do. One's not right. One's not wrong. It's just, whatever you choose. But at the same time, like in that 50-50 space, are you putting too much on your significant other, right? Like that's always got to be a question. And if you're not, and everything is working out, did you have to struggle before you got there? And if you're in that traditional relationship, how long did you have to wait before you got into that relationship? You see what I'm saying? Like there's a whole lot of questions and things that have to be considered when you embark on those things. And then for the ladies, like regardless if you're in a traditional relationship or in a 50-50 relationship, what are you doing with your younger years, right? What are you doing with that time? Are you having children? Are you not interested? Because also too, that also changes. People grow and they change their mind about having kids. I know people that have said when they were much younger that they had zero desire to have children. And now they have several kids, 3, 4 kids. You see what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, we definitely have to consider that. And it's just it's different for women because, you physically cannot after a certain point. But with men, like eventually you can, whether it's earlier or later in life. It's just harder when it takes longer. You know what I mean? So I definitely think that, that plays a huge part. Now, when it comes to how do we approach it, I think that instilling in children at a younger age is how you ultimately kind of resolve it as an issue, right? Because if at a younger age you understand, like, look, this is what it's going to be like when you get older. So I'm not telling you to go ahead and hurry up and get married or go ahead and hurry up and rush and have children, but know that you want to consider starting, set them up for success. Teach your children about finances and money at a younger age. Teach them that, if you want to have kids and have a family, learn how to vet at a younger age so it doesn't take as long to find yourself in a relationship where you have a successful relationship and have children, right? You want to make sure you instill those things in your kids at a younger age so that, this race against time, they have more time on their clock than most people who didn't know in advance. E, did you have any other solutions?
Yeah, I definitely think that you kind of hit on most of them. I think the time aspect is a very important one. As excuse me, as I kind of stated in one of our past issues, I think that we need to kind of move back towards that understanding of being in relationships, and more serious committed relationships a lot earlier in life. And I understand that when you're younger, you don't necessarily know exactly how to choose. But I think that, like you were just referring to as well, working with your elders who have been able to get it right, working with individuals who do have some of the things that you admire out of life, and speaking to them and seeing, hey, what do you look for? What do you choose? You know what I'm saying? What do you think about this? How do you think about that? How do you, decide if someone is a good mate, that can help kind of speed up that process and give them a little bit more time, right? Because again, one of the greatest um, one of the greatest factors that we can receive is the knowledge from others. And I think that, being able to hear from somebody else's story and somebody else's struggle, that can help you avoid certain situations. So I definitely think that helps. That helps us also then on the financial clock, because it can kind of get us, closer to figuring out how we can, remove ourselves from necessarily being in the race, if you will. And to be able to provide for a family in a more in a manner in which most people are looking to provide for. And I think it also can help women with their biological clock, because then they'll understand that maybe they may be having someone that they feel like is the person that they look to want to have children with, you know what I'm saying, and a time frame that they would like to have it. You know what I'm saying? You guys can discuss those type of things. You can plan those type of things. And hopefully you guys can be where you guys would like to be at when you guys decide to take on that journey. So that to me, I think is what, that to me is some of the things that I think is part of the solution is, kind of being a little bit more focused towards this early on, to attack it early on and to be open to it and, more conversational about it early on. And also having the right type of mentors. I think all of those things will help us to make it through. So I don't know if you want to go into the book of the month and for Malik this month. And,
I got it. Yeah, I got
all right.
it. So, every month we have a book of the month, and this month it is a Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask by Claude Anderson. You guys want to make sure that y'all tap into that. My apologies. Y'all want to make sure y'all tap into that book. Y'all go ahead and check it out. Claude Anderson is a brilliant Black man, and he has written some amazing books. So y'all definitely should make sure you go ahead and check that book out. The Black Business of the Month it's called Stand With Us Clothing. It's a clothing line. You can find them online. They have t-shirts, hats, sweatsuits, all that stuff. The clothes are dope. They have jackets and everything. And then the motivational quote, I have a couple of them. One of the quotes that I have is, the most precious resource we all have is time. Steve Jobs said that. And I think it's important to recognize that, like I said earlier, time is the thing that you spend but can't get back, and so you have to make the best of the time that you have. That's what makes it so precious. And Margaret Peters said that time has a wonderful way of showing us what really matters, right? Because a lot of times when you squander your time and things happen in life, whether it be through trauma or whether it be through some great thing that happened, when you're reflective, you take the time to sit back and look at what you did with your time. You look at, how you spent it, good or bad, and you grow from it and you learn from it. So it's really important to value time. And not only in valuing time, because time is so invaluable, make sure that you know that when you embark on those relationships, where are you? And when you find your person, are they on the same page with you with regards to time, right? Because everybody's timeline looks different. No matter if you're different ages, same ages, or whatever, that timeline looks different. And do you have patience, right? Because if you have patience, everybody has to understand that everything isn't always going to happen in the time they want it to happen, right? It's going to happen when it's supposed to. And so, be patient in your life, but recognize that time is precious. So, with that, we want to thank each and every one of you guys for tapping in with us right here at the Counterpoise Podcast. We hope you enjoyed our topic today. Shout out to Malik. He'll be back with us on Wednesday. If you guys have any topics that you'd like to hear us discuss, please feel free to hit us up in our DMs. If you want to be on the show, please let me know, let E know, let Malik know, hit us up in the DMs. We like to have company. And yeah, Make sure you tap in with us every Wednesday for What's Up Wednesday, where we are on Instagram at around 8:30 p.m. Otherwise, you're going to see this 1:30 on Saturday. Trying to think, is there anything that I'm missing? Nah.
No, you hit it
All right.
all automatically. I'll see y'all
All right.
next week, everybody.
Yeah. There is one thing. If you want to tap in with us, our socials are going to be at the end. So make sure y'all hit us up. Other than that, you guys have an amazing, productive week. Be good to one another. We'll see y'all Wednesday.
Peace out.